innanzitutto buonasera in italiano, perché stavo appena parlando in italiano, quindi I will switch to English. So welcome to Webster University Geneva. It's a pleasure to welcome our distinguished speakers, Roberto Di Stefano, who is the CEO of a joint venture between Stellantis and
NGEPS.
NGEPS, okay, thank you. And he's in charge of the, between inverted commas, electrification of the company. Then we have Daniela Leverato, who is the technical officer of the International Motorcycle Manufacturer Association here in Geneva. Claude Chaudet, who is our colleague here in Geneva, and he's a professor of computer science and the head of the very same department. Stefano Maggi, professor of contemporary history at the University of Siena, and our moderator, Emilio Radiccioni from CERN and the Italian National Institute for Nuclear Physics. Okay, welcome very much and thank you for being with us. Emilio, you are the chair.
So, who wants to introduce our Webster? Do you have a
Well, I would like to start with the historian point of view, so we have a general idea what we're talking about.
the PowerPoint?
Yes. Send a PowerPoint to your email address. I should have already downloaded.
Okay, I will give you 1 minute, 15 minutes.
Otherwise, if you want to set the scene, I can start with mine, which was downloaded.
Okay, so we change the order of, so we start with what is already downloaded. Oh, okay, thank you, Daniela.
I will go into another to move. Yes, thank you. You should be able to see it on both screens. So I hope also for the panelists. Yeah. So today I would like to give you a world tour on electric vehicles. I mean, talking about the future of, I don't see, sorry, just I don't see it there. You can see it here? I'm fine. Yeah, I can see it just for the audience. So it's a fantastic journey which contains, I mean, could go on in several directions, but today I would like to give a frame about automotive issues and challenges today, going deeper in vehicle technology, what does it mean, and especially in electric vehicles. I mean, if we have time, we can go through some policies of the major market today, China, EU, California, Japan, and India, and some forecasts and challenges can be also interesting. Because why such why such a theme for today's conference? So we hear every day in the news about Paris agreements, COP21, 26, carbon neutrality, sustainability, several types of hybrids and electric vehicles, digital companies becoming car companies buying digital companies. So what's behind that? And today I would like to give you, let's say, a framework to better understand all these issues. And so, first of all, to start with the top challenges of the automotive industry. But traditionally, at every stage of manufacturing, the automotive industry has to cope with already some challenges, environmental imperative, safety requirements, competitive pressure, and customer expectation. But what are the top challenges today? So today, one of the top challenges is climate change and air pollution. We all hear in the news at least once per day. Production cost, and we have heard about semiconductors shortage, steel shortage, and of course high price for sourcing connected vehicles. I mean, that's going to be the future, if not, it's already partially a reality. Cybersecurity software updates and the changing of the consumer behavior. Shared mobility, well, of course, there was some limitation to this during COVID, but also a shift from ownership to access. And automatic driving. Automatic driving is becoming a reality as well as self-driving evolution. So automotive industries, but also society is undergoing the greatest transformation in history today. And there is a strong interlink to all these issues, so we cannot tackle them all. That's why I decided, I'm sorry that the presentation does not reproduce it very well. I would like to focus on climate change for the purpose of this presentation. Climate change, where does it come from? Well, the first point are the national pledges to mitigate climate change and reduce air pollution. Of course, various causes, various sources causing climate change have been identified, and road transport has been identified as one of these contributors. I cannot say it's a major contributor, but I have to say it's one of the most visible ones because cars are among us. So it's been very much a target of regulators, also for this reason. But of course, automotive industry acknowledges there is a need to continuously reduce gaseous emission, but calls for an integrated approach of all sources, not only transport, but also all parameters, because the parameters determining gaseous emissions are several, and I've listed the main four. Vehicle technology is one of them, and we will focus on that today, but there are also other three: fuel quality, inspection and maintenance of in-use vehicles, and road and traffic management. I mean, if we just think about the last three, fuel quality, the market fuel quality, I mean, you can put in your car today, you can tackle all the existing fleet. So a cumulative 1.4 billion cars worldwide. This could be much more effective than just targeting the new fleet, which is to come. And maybe in 10, even if very fast in 10 years from now. So policies should be very comprehensive, and the need for an integrated holistic approach for controlling emission vehicles cannot be overemphasized. As said, for the purpose of this presentation, we will focus on vehicle technology, and I will just briefly go through them. There are many of them. I've listed some of them here. Without going in details, what I wanted to say is that there has been, over the past years, especially, I have to say, over the last year, the very one we are in today, the gradual tightening of the greenhouse gas policies worldwide. So I wanted to give you a short overview of the many greenhouse gas policies existing worldwide today, because there has been accelerations, but until recently, we have to say that in later than 1 decade, greenhouse gas emission policies have progressed significantly. Just 10 years ago, only 4 governments had introduced mandatory greenhouse gas policies. And these were China, Japan, South Korea, and the United States. Europe and Canada had announced some of them, but had not yet any regulatory framework at that point in time. Today, 10 years later, 10 governments, and they've listed them in green aside, have established standards for light-duty vehicles at least. And they are all among the top vehicle markets worldwide. The vehicles sold in those countries account for 80%, if not more, of the global sales of cars. So if you tackle the fleet, the new fleets coming out of these countries, you would tackle 80% of the fleet of the cars put on the market every year, which is quite consistent. And other large markets such as Australia, Thailand, and Vietnam are in the process of developing these standards as well. So I wanted to show you very briefly, without going details of the chart, the policies reflected in a graph, I mean, in terms of targets. You have the historical trends and the target of this major market worldwide. And also, where do we stay here? That's why I put a bar, and the limits that are valid in these countries. Well, we can see that in greenhouse gases, Europe took the leadership, and we are at that point, 2021, this year. The target is 95, a very famous 95 grams CO2 per kilometer. But it's not the only one. The other one are quite close in terms of target, and you can see also on this slide the target for the other countries. We have to say that these values, it was very, I did not do it, but it's very difficult to make this comparison because every country has different standards, of course, but not only. The standards are based on different driving cycles, on different test procedures, and therefore it's very difficult to compare them. It's not just that you change the unit of measurement. You have to take into account correlation factors in order to be able to to compare one type of cycle with the others. So there are teams of analysts doing that, and I've taken the chart of the leading institution used for that, which is ICCT. And I mean, in Europe, we talk about fuel consumption, for example. The same curve seen from the US perspective would be just the other way around, reverted, because the US, for example, speak about fuel economy, but the issue is the same. So the greenhouse gas policies were considered not enough. And especially since, I have to say, beginning of this year, I've seen more and more zero-emission vehicle policies coming up. These zero-emission policies are not completely new to the world. And that's why I've prepared an overview. So with the major market and also a bit of the history. It's very condensed. There are many information behind that. And if we have time and you have questions, we can go the details of the various countries. It's very interesting to see what's happening, I have to say. And probably because I'm part of the sector, but it's anyway, also as a user, I find it very relevant to monitor. So zero-emission vehicles, well, would mean that you have no CO2, no pollutants. Okay, that's a basic. So the first one to introduce mandatory target for EVs, ZEVs, was California 30 years ago, quite a while. And they had a zero-emission vehicle mandate, which scared a lot the auto industry. And but things are accelerating nowadays. And nowadays, so what I put like with a small error are policies which were announced but not yet enacted. Okay, so for every of these major markets, what is in the first line, it's what is already known and well in place. What is with the arrow is announced and to come quite soon. Let's see some values. California announced by 2035 that all new cars and light trucks sold with zero-emission vehicles. All. For motorcycle, something like this has not yet been announced, but well, I know because I'm working with CARB on a regular basis. CARB is preparing an assessment to have 50% of motorcycle sales zero-emission vehicles by 2035 at the same time. This is not yet disclosed, but there are public documents around it, and we can also see some implementation. The US has not been as supportive as California towards zero-emission vehicle, let's say in general towards greenhouse gas, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But we will go in detail shortly. But August this year, well, of course, we know there is a new administration. There has been a presidential executive order by, so 50% of all new cars and light trucks
Adesso va. Ciao Cilla.
zero-emission vehicles. Half of the car and light
Perché alle 7 alle 8 devo giocare con Matteo Mario Forme.
Go into that. Some words on China.
ce
Because
la
China
facciamo,
is
certo.
leading. And China has had mandatory target for EV sales in 2017. And already at the end of 2020, they reached 5 million zero-emission vehicles in their country.
Adesso va. Comunque ho chiamato domani.
About 5 million. And okay, recently also China announced their goal towards carbon neutrality by 2060. And because of that, they even reinforced their zero-emission vehicle mandate, which is now target phasing out internal combustion engine in a bit more than 10 years by 2035. China, another huge market. But Europe was already, as we know, very, very leading in greenhouse gas policies. And now, very recently, with the Green Deal, announced stronger, more stricter parameters. And in July, the implementation package, so-called Fit for 55 package, well, it proposed 55 CO2 reduction target by 2030, so much stronger than what announced before. But above all, an ICE car bans for 2035. India has also made commitments towards carbon neutrality, and but I have to say they have very ambitious targets of only selling electric vehicles by 2030. But they realized 2 years ago that it was a bit too ambitious, and they scaled it down to 30% by 2030. Still a huge failure. Japan is also transitioning to 100% hybrid or electric cars by 2035. And it was also recently announced. And several Asian countries are also planning to ban fossil fuels in the next 15, 20 years. So I would like to, well, first of all, this sets the scene on why electrification is an issue today. It was born under the push of the regulators. But still, but anyway, we have to say technologies develop nowadays. There is convergence on the solution, on the type of motor, on the type of batteries, and we are in the phase of massive industrialization and offer to final customer. So where do we stand now on the market today? Today, 10 million electric cars were on the world last year, and I mean mix hybrid, pure electric, and plug-in hybrid. So when we look at the sales today, around 4% of total car sales are electric, which means every 100 cars sold, 4 are electric in the world. And because of this, many policies being in place and soon to be enacted in several countries, the scales are foreseen to upscale from 4% to 40% in 2030. So I would very much like to give you more details about the major or the detailed policies in every country or in this major market which we have seen. But of course, time is running. So just a very quick, let me go very quickly around the world to give you some highlights, something which may be different from country to countries. So we have already seen that California was a pioneer in first establishing a zero-emission vehicle mandate. And we have to say that US was less supportive at federal state. But the push was at the state level. Nowadays, 1/3 of the US states committed themselves to follow the California standard for zero-emission vehicles. And not only for cars and light duties, because there are different definitions in Europe and in the US. Cars are not defined the same. A lot of time, let's say, US pickup is defined as light duty by them. So that's included also in this mandate. But I have to say that several state-level policies supported also heavy-duty vehicles, so lorries and so on. As said, the US administration recently really pushed in favor of promoting zero-emission vehicles by 2030. Very few highlight on China. We could spend hours talking about their market because China leads the world in deployment of electric vehicles. Almost all the world's electric vehicles are in China nowadays. I listed here just with the percentage because they are striking. Cars, 50%, okay, but of the entire world. E-bikes, 85%, if not more. E-buses, 99%. That's why China has such a strong voice on this issue nowadays, not only in the news and on the stock market, but also standardization that is. So half of the world's batteries are Chinese. China has also the largest charging network. If we take 10 public charging points, China has 6 of them worldwide. And also dominates the global market for electric two-wheelers. I have a slides on their mandate. I mentioned it before. It was already there. It started 12 years ago. 2012. So almost 10 years ago. But the speed increased really dramatically. And in 2020, they already reached 5 million vehicles on the roads. Vehicles which are four-wheelers. The two-wheelers are not included in these values. And if we speak about two-wheelers, I won't enter into the details of all the volumes, but you can check it afterwards on my presentation if you're interested in. Electric two-wheelers are omnipresent in China. Electric bicycle in volume are 250 million, and the sales are 25 million every year. And then they have a category which is called low-speed electric vehicles. They're actually not that slow because they can drive up to 70 kilometers per hour. And they are not accounted in the previous fleet amount that we have seen. And they are already 5 million of vehicles. And they are also a major producer of two-wheelers, motorcycles. So they produce around 34 million electric vehicles. So it was produced 20. Very briefly on the charging station, they have the majority is also interesting of charging points worldwide. Very interesting to know also that the impact of this charging station on their global emission is different depending on whether you are charging in the north or in the south, because the north is more carbon intensive than the south. Apart from this note, because for China, energy dependence and imports are very important. What this chart wants to show you primarily is that in the east you have the highest density of charging station, in the middle a bit less, and in the east a bit less. But we are still talking about 5 million chargers in China. So for Europe, I will go maybe quicker through it because probably the situation in Europe is already well known. This was the greenhouse gas target. Green Deal, I said, very striking. I see car bans as from 2035. And this should be the post Green Deal scenario. So nowadays we are here, 2020, 2021 is not very far. Gasoline and diesel are still the majority of propulsion systems sold nowadays in Europe. And we have to arrive at zero emission, which means these two green and gray bulbs should disappear, replaced by new propulsion systems. Well, as you can imagine, the challenges are enormous in Europe, especially because the distribution of charging points is not yet there, it's not mature. The Commission said we will need at least 6 million chargers in 10 years, and we are around 220,000. It's bigger with 6 million charging points. So Japan is also transitioning. I said also they set very strong target about all cars sold by 2035 to be electrified. But we also say that in Japan, okay, in the beginning with the Toyota Prius and a lot of subvention, the hybrid vehicles were strongly sold. Recently, Japan was one of the few markets where EV sales dropped more than the overall car sales last year because of the pandemic, but more than in other countries. So of course, Japan doubled, Japan doubled its subsidized, and of course, because of that, sales are expected to rise again in Japan. I will finish with India. India has also carbon neutrality target, and they have done in India. They have done huge efforts to fight the pollution. We all know the strong pollution they have in India, and they have done a leapfrogging from Euro, let's say, equivalent, Indian equivalent, from Euro 4 to Euro 6 in April 2020. So their policies were already very tight, and now they have set the target of going further in the direction of zero-emission vehicles, and they want to have 30% electric vehicles by 2030. Their market is huge. Just in the term of motorcycles and scooters, we speak about 18 million bikes, which should be electric, out of 21 million. These are values of 2019, pre-COVID. During COVID in India, there has been a huge decrease in sales because, of course, the economy has been impacted, and of course, also people didn't move, offices were closed, and production were also stopped. So the global e-car sales is growing. Nowadays, we are here at the last bar. We have a total of more than 3 million electric vehicles sold every year, but the global market is expected to grow to reach 69 million by 2028. And with that, I will almost close my presentation. I'm sorry if it took a little bit longer, but I think we can all see that there are a lot of challenges ahead. And I've tried to list it down here, some of the points where I think there is more, where the challenges remain, and I think that more work is needed. Let's list a few, and then I'm sure in the discussion we will tackle some more. Recharging infrastructure, deployment number, the charger compatibility, but also decarbonization of electricity, green energy, and batteries, sustainable batteries, well, more with let's say broader driving range, less costly, possibly new technology for batteries, and of course overall vehicles which are affordable for the population. So I will just give you a final look at the reality. This is a message that Tesla's, I will try to see if I can, no, I cannot make it bigger, but you can read it later. Tesla's users received this summer in California. They were asked not to charge their vehicle during daytime because of heat wave stress on the grid. Okay, then you don't charge your vehicle during the day, which is of course already a limitation. What do you do? Well, at least you charge it during the night. During the night, California cannot use sustainable energy coming from the sun. So again, you go back to carbon fossil-based energy. That's a problem. So I think a reality check is needed at this moment. Thank you for your attention, and I'll stay at disposal for any questions.
Thank you. And I wanted just to apologize because now it's time for Stefano, but I forgot to introduce the bio notes of the speakers because we're running late. But as they say in people, you can just Google their names, you will find all the information necessary. Daniela currently is the technical director of the Motorcycle Association, who used to be the deputy technical director of the Automobile Association in Paris. And he's a chemical engineer, correct?
On top, yes. So I've done research on alternative propulsion types.
Okay.
Yes, fuel cells.
Stefano, it's, you want to read some bio notes, maybe if you have them?
I have them. So Stefano is a full professor in contemporary history and chairman of the Department of Political and International Science at the University of Siena in Italy. And he worked for public administrations for the development of railway grids. And his research mainly concerns the transport history in an international environment and sustainable mobility. So I think that this historical approach, after the great deal of data we have been provided, comes at the right point.
Okay, thank you. The paper is about sustainable mobility and the best practices in Europe. Only a few examples about which is sustainable mobility. First of all, which is sustainable mobility? This phrase is frequent now, but it means not only electric vehicles, which are very important, but must be something more. A networked transport that uses modes of movement with least impact on the environment and the health. The first one, theoretical basis for dealing with the traffic problems, was the Buchanan report. So now we are in history. In 1963 in Great Britain, this report entitled Traffic in Towns said that the key element was to break the crossing traffic and to reduce the passages to the only ones who need to go to a certain point. So the crossing traffic inside a town was the problem. We were in the 60s when the mass motorization was developing. This was the first basis. And 2 years ago, my town, which is Siena in Italy, adopted a pioneering restrictive measure in 1965. The mayor closed the central part of the city around the Piazza del Campo, which is on the right in the bottom, which is the main square of the town. This was the first closure, but many other towns followed. So in 1973, 46 urban centers had traffic restrictions. So it was the origin of the zone with the limited traffic, which are typical of Italian towns also now. And now we are coming near our days, and in 2002, the European Mobility Week began, and in 2021 it celebrated the 20th year of European Mobility Week. In all Europe, in September, there is this European Mobility Week, which tries to sensibilize population about the problem of traffic and the problem of mobility. So for sustainable mobility, we have to reduce air pollution and the greenhouse gas emissions, which is the first theme also for industry, for automotive industry. Then noise pollution, road congestion, accidents, and the deterioration of urban areas caused by the space occupied by vehicles to the detriment of pedestrians, and also land consumption caused by the construction of roads. Now we have been constructing roads for 7 decades, almost 7 decades, and roads and also parking and infrastructures for private mobility, not for public transport. And for sustainable mobility is also necessary to disseminate pedestrian mobility, cycling mobility, the use of public transport, the planning of mobility with a figure of a mobility manager, the limitations of vehicular traffic, even with car sharing and carpooling experiences. And then we need a mobility education to rationalize and pursue economies in transport. We have to move persons and goods in an environmentally friendly way. This word demotorization is difficult to put in practice, very difficult. It means not live without cars, obviously, but reducing the use of cars and motorcycles to what is necessary. Some journeys cannot be made without motor vehicles, but in other cases, we can use bicycle, we can go on foot, we can go on by public means of transport. Best practices, a few best practices in Europe, but there are many best practices now. I haven't the time to cite everyone. Before of all, we have to change our personal habits, and we have to change also industrial logistics. Pontevedra, the first one, is a town in Spain, Galicia. It's a pedestrian city, which means that in Pontevedra, in 20 years, in about 20 years, they have eliminated architectural barriers. They have reduced the traffic and the speed of traffic. They introduced the pedestrianization, so zone only for pedestrians, and the safe home school routes. It was not a mobility project, it was a city project. A city project without discriminations. They didn't take out old cars or diesel cars. They just took out cars without many impositions. In Pontevedra, many citizens have their car, but they use rationally their car. So in practice, the city has put narrow car lanes, wide sidewalks, and a labyrinth street for streets with almost 1,000, not only 80, 50 pedestrian crossings. So the city is thought for the people, not for cars. This is Pontevedra, before and after the city project. Another one. It's easy to understand which means this city project. Then a few other examples. Oslo, they reduced parking spaces in the historical center. This is a fundamental point, because normally we build more and more parking areas. No, they put in practice the reduction of parking spaces. In 1915, in 4 years, only a part, obviously, of the territory, the historic center was free from cars. Amsterdam, another example. Amsterdam was the city for bicycles, and now they are following the Oslo example. Copenhagen, another city, now it's the most cycling city in Europe. It overtakes Amsterdam. In 2015, about the number of bicycles overtook the number of cars. The last best practice, here we are in South Tyrol, Italy, in the province of Bolzano, the Valpusteria Railway. This is not a best practice, not for a city, but for a territory. The Val Venosta Railway was closed in 1990. It has only 3 trips a day of trains, so it was a dry branch. The railway reopens since 2005. Now it has 24 trips of trains. Before 3 trains a day, now 24 trains a day. And the railway became the basis of the development of the valley. Here we have a networked transport between trains, buses, and bicycles. Now they are projecting the electrification of the railway, because the traction is diesel now. And they project a service even more intensive, each 15 minutes. The same that of the Le Mans Express from Geneva to here, 15 minutes service. So this railway became the motor of the development of the valley. Some images. Interchange stations for buses, trains, and bicycles, also for cars, because there are out of the stations also the parking areas, obviously. And removal of architectural barriers, cycle paths alongside the railway, and a single ticket for all transports. Normally, we have a single ticket for all transports only in the in the cities, in the metropolitan cities, such as Geneva. It has only one ticket for all means of transport. Here is a province. Now we need a mobility government. In this period, we need a mobility government for means of transport to protect the environment and the health. So electric vehicles and cycling paths and pedestrian areas and a mobility as a network, not even mean of transport separated from the others, but all together. The phrase, and I finish, of the mayor of Bogota, Gustavo Petro, in 2012. A country is developed not when the poor own cars, but when the rich use public transport and bicycles. Okay, I finished. Thanks.
Very much. May I propose that we go to smart cities. The next speaker is Automotive, professor here at Webster University. He's the head of computer science department, and he has been working since a long time on the Internet of Things, and he is now interested in the topic of privacy and smart cities.
Okay, thank you. So today I wanted to say a few words about smart cities more than really the electrical vehicle, because that's more of my specialty. I mean, there will be a few words about the vehicles themselves, but yeah. It's a small issue because it's PDF, so I don't know how I'm going to turn pages without. It's a technical detail. Okay. Good. Is there a way to download this thing? Or maybe this way. No, it should work this way with it.
See, nothing.
No.
Sorry, everyone. That means it.
Because it's still in the browser, but sorry for the technical details. Computers never work. I should be well aware of that.
Always prove an enormous pleasure when there is an IT expert with some technical law in the world.
Is there? Where's the? Yeah, it's here. Okay. Let's try to. Split. And master. Wait. And that should be better.
Stop share.
So, or this one. Well, yeah, so should be okay, I guess. Yeah, sorry for the false start. No, I don't want to update anything. Anyway,
We don't see anything on the screen.
well, that's going to be fun. So I should probably. Do you have a way to duplicate the screen? Or?
No.
No, that will.
It's on the Zoom.
It looks like a second desktop. There must be two.
Yeah, of course there is. But
But
so I don't know which direction. Probably here.
I was a PDF.
yeah,
Okay. Cool. Does it work?
but
Yeah, it
Wow.
works. I just want to share the other one then. Share.
taking aspect always.
Screen. And probably it should be this one. Okay. Okay. But I need to be there to see what I'm projecting. Okay. So yeah, so as I said, I wanted to no, almost there. Okay, so I'll make it quicker. So since many years we have that idea that the city of the future should be whatever the future means, but the city of the future should be something where the vehicles traffic are optimized with respect to air pollution, of course, but also ground very small travel times, produce very low noise, prevent and react to accidents, etc. And so I mean, this has been an idea going on in the imagination of realistic people as well as science fiction people. But we can see these images from a very long time. So this is an excerpt from a document dated from 1956 about the car and the city of the future. So there's been this idea, okay? And when you look at what the city of the future is most likely to look like today, we can see that technologies are a bit everywhere. I mean, you have, of course, the cars themselves, which are more today like computers on wheels than cars with a digital screen. If you look at Tesla, it's typically that they took a computer, they put a motor, something around, and go. So there's a lot of information which can come from these autonomic cars about the whereabouts of the car, the speed, everything. They can sense a lot of things. You also have lots of sensors in the infrastructure, whether it's magnetic loops in the pavement, or cameras, or any kind of sensors of pollutants, noise, etc. All of that feeds some algorithms which historize data in data centers, and they take also historical data from data centers, and they can, if there is a will, give or produce some decisions to run some actuators. So you can close some roads, you can influence the red lights and the sequence of the red lights. You can influence the speed limit depending on what are the objectives. So you can see that in the middle of that, there are some algorithms, and the designs of this is not that easy when you think about it, because there's a ton of data coming and the objectives are not so clear either. So if you have to do an algorithm or a policy, there's a certain number of tools that you can use when you look at the way that we manage traffic in cities. So I won't go over all of them, but basically you have simulations. You can have the map of your city, little tiny cars playing around, and you see what happens if I increase the red light time on that axis of 30 seconds, etc., etc. Okay? You can have that, or you can have statistical models, macroscopic models, which come either from fluid dynamics or from queuing theory. And it shares many similarities depending at which scale you look at the problem. If you look at the very big scale, or you can see vehicles as little particles if you want. It's a fluid behavior. And if you look more at every intersection level, it looks a lot like a network of that we manipulate in computer science, where you have items, so vehicles in that case, waiting in line. Okay, that's for a macroscopic model. At the very microscopic level, you can model the whole traffic with differential equations or cellular automata, which give you a certain number of hints of how the general behavior of the whole system. Okay, so what we can see, from these models, is that first you have some kind of phase transition behavior. This comes from cellular automata, basically. But if you increase the number of vehicles in a city, I admit iPhone. It's done. Okay. So if you increase the number of vehicles going inside the city per unit of time, so the flow, you will see that first you have an increase in the density of vehicles that you can accept in the city, and then after a while it decreases again. There's clearly a breaking point where you use most of your city's infrastructure up to a certain point where it's too dense, and then congestion starts, and it starts to be really a problem. Okay, so that there's multiple publications on that. Okay, and from these models you can also find some identification of some congestion situations and the reason of that. The most easy to understand is gridlock or deadlock in computer science, which is represented on the small map there. Everybody moves forward in the intersection, even when the light is green or red or orange, and then after everybody seems to starts to block each other, and then you have something like that. I once stayed more than 2 hours in a situation like that in Paris, because the whole big roundabout was blocked because everybody was everywhere. Anyway, that happens. And you also, from these models, you can also find some interesting results. For example, if you take there's a paradox that's not new. It was published in the 60s, 69, that the Brest paradox, in that sometimes the intuition is that you have a traffic problem inside the city, you want to add a street to divert the traffic a little bit, or you can actually slow down the traffic. And it has been witnessed, it's not only a theoretical result, it has been witnessed in Seoul, in Stuttgart, in New York, etc., where they try to remove some motorways, either because of philosophical decisions or to just do roadworks and increase the capacity of the motorway. And while the motorway was closed, the traffic improved in the city. And not only because less people to their cars, the same amount of people globally, but they distribute better in small streets and the traffic is more fluid. So there's clearly a system like that that we understand, but it's very hard to control that phenomenon. The problem is that if you want to do that, you can use a model like that, or the results, the simulation, everything to drive a policy, but you need to clearly formalize your objectives. Is it greenhouse gas emission? Is it traffic reduction? Is it noise reduction? They probably go together, but not necessarily. And the problem is that how do you get accurate parameters for the models? Because first, there's a question of the traffic, movement patterns. Okay, where do people start in the morning? Where do they go? What are the alternatives in terms of transport if you want to promote multimodality, for example? These are real questions. And usually these questions are answered by statistical surveys. So the enquête ménage déplacement in France, for example, that kind of surveys, but they correspond to one photograph at a given time. So if you provide more transportation, maybe the figures will change totally. So that's not an easy thing to get. And the second parameter, which is probably the most critical one, is what's the behavior of the vehicles in function of different parameters. In function of the speed of the gear, you can expect them to make different noise, or different noise levels. So if you want to optimize that, that's something, but also to consume the different. For example, in Paris, they just reduced the speed limit from 50 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour. Probably they did the work before, but it's not guaranteed that it will consume less. Because if you have to shift down one gear, then maybe your engine might be over a higher RPM. So, well, that's it. And the other question is that, speaking of electrical vehicles, do they really reduce the pollution somehow? Intuitively, we would all say yes, because they're nice, they don't emit gas. But when you look at that's for the speed. But that's just a graphic of the speed too. And fuel consumption with respect to the different gears you are in at the same speed. So you can see that it's more effective to be, if you are running at 20 kilometers an hour, it's more effective to be, of course, in a second gear than third, than first gear, etc. You see that it's not linear as we would expect. But if we come back to the question of electrical vehicles, I mean, there's a thing today, which is the way that electricity is produced. Because today the amount of renewable energy is very low. If you look at it, there's a hydroelectricity, which has a nice share. Nuclear would stand at not in renewable, but at least in non-greenhouse gas emitting energy. Okay? And then the solar and the wind are very low. And the rest is basically burning some coal, burning some oil, burning some gas. So if you optimize the pollution here, to have somewhere in Russia where they burn some gas, and you transport electricity and you lose half of the electricity during the transport, I'm not entirely sure that globally on the planet will solve the problem. But there's probably something to do here, I mean, and something to be evaluated globally. And let's say that we have all the model, and we are able to control a bit where the electricity comes from. You use more renewable energy, you store it somewhere with hydrogen or something like that. There's the question of, okay, we can make some policies to reduce traffic jams, to make people consume less, but how to enforce these policies? Because drivers need to abide by the recommendations, and we know that they won't. Okay, because usually there's a lot of game theory results that will tell you that selfish behavior has a global negative effect, but individually it's very good. So if you overtake everybody to turn right at the last moment, will probably produce some traffic jams, but you don't care because you are in front of everybody. So how to avoid going, discourage that kind of behavior is not easy. Law enforcement works, of course, but it doesn't really work. I mean, it cannot really work unless we want to control everybody. Because the problems, if you look at that, it escalates for a very microscopic scale. So somebody enters an intersection, blocks another street, which in turn blocks another street. Then people get nervous and it escalates. So that can work, but only up to a certain limit. Besides, people will adhere to the objective, okay? But if you put law enforcement on top of that, they will just try not to get caught. So it's maybe counterproductive in terms of getting people's acceptation. You can limit the cars. Of course, cars could be limited to not go over a certain speed or whatever when they are in a certain vicinity, but we know that they can and will be hacked. I mean, everybody remembers the little motorbikes that we had when we were 14, and everybody used to go to the local garage to remove the limiter. So that wouldn't be surprised. And then the last thing would be self-driving cars, maybe. Maybe self-driving cars can provide a good alternative because there are somewhat, I mean, if you can create a fleet of self-driving cars where you're somehow halfway between public transportation and the convenience of the shortest route. And of course, behind all of that, one of the main drivers will also be political issues, because people's perceptions and politics may differ from reality. There's been a ton of initiatives which have been negatively perceived. The Paris limitation, for example, is a good example. Right now, you even have articles in the Financial Times and everything that says, okay, green people rejoice, but on the other hand, Parisian people yell all the time. So that's it. But historically, in 1999 in Minneapolis, that's one of the flagship examples. But you had ramp meters for accessing the highways. We are controlling traffic, the influence of traffic on the highways for a very long time. And in 1999, they reached that point where the traffic jams were too high. So there's a senator who blamed the freeway meter ramps. Okay, so he published a freedom to drive plan, promising to turn off the ramp, raise speed limits, dedicate the left lane to passing only so that you don't have slow cars on the left lane, etc. And well, finally it didn't work because it wasn't doable step. But they studied the shutting down of the ramp for a while, for road work, okay? And they showed that they do improve traffic. When you shut down the ramps, then it improves a little bit of traffic. Or when you shut down the ramps, it decreases a little bit, increases the traffic jam. So, yeah. So the ramps do improve the traffic, but not tremendously. So nobody's right here. neither the people who are against, neither the people who are for. This has an effect, but it cannot be the only measure. Okay, so, and then after, let's assume that we have all that. So there's still a lot of open questions if you think about the future. So electric cars, okay, let's assume we have a source of energy, which is okay, even if we solve the problems, the different problems, which can be solved. Well, some people are working on that. Electrodes problem can be solved by nanotechnologies, etc. But still, what's the cost of manufacturing recycling in terms of energy, in terms of greenhouse gas emission, and stuff like that? So we need to consider that. Okay. On the other hand, I mean, it's also not true to just look at the pure cost of manufacturing an electric car and say it's too much, because we need to balance it also with the cost of manufacturing a regular car, recycling a regular car, plus the transportation of fuel, etc. So, I mean, the problem is complex. That's the whole idea. Okay, and then there's also some society change that need to be done. I mean, we're taking out of decisions for economic reasons. If you look at the way that waste management is done, for example, you have containers on the street now, okay, which is presented by cities as ecological measure, because you have recycling containers and then you bring your container and it doesn't have the dirty truck coming to your house. But on the other hand, instead of the truck coming to your house, you have dozens of tiny vehicles who go to the containers, find the container full, go back home, come back another time. I'm not sure that the global consumption and greenhouse gas emission is better. Of course, economically it's better. You need to pay less trucks and less drivers. But justifying that with ecology may not be entirely honest. Okay, and same goes for the last mile of shopping. Is it better to do delivery with trucks going towards, okay, like Amazon or stuff like that, which is so pinpointed to for being not so ecological friendly, or is it better that we all take our cars to go to the shopping mall? Not sure of that. It's so I mean, the whole thing here is that the problem is complex and probably there will not be a single solution. I mean, we cannot act only on cars or electricity production or cities or anything. We need to consider the problem as a whole and make something coherent if we want that to work. And finally, when we have that nice infrastructure with the cars communicating, being controlled by a system with global objectives, etc., what about cybersecurity and privacy? That's also a question that needs to be addressed, because it's very easy to track somebody already today. So we're on Zoom, so we should know that. And but what about tomorrow when all the cars are connected everywhere and tracks are? I'm going to do that, basically. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, the whole idea was to raise some questions more than really good answers. Probably understood that.
It may be time to go to the point of view of free to move e-solution, which is a joint venture between Stellantis and the power company. And Roberto is the CEO of free to move e-solutions.
Yeah, thank you. And good evening. It's a bit late, but I will try to be. We have no PowerPoint. Second, I'm not selling cars. That is really, I guess, after having got all these messages, is I guess are good news. So I want to focus this discussion of the new mobility, let's call, or sustainable mobility from a different angles. The angles that has from the one that has to translate in field policies, constraints, a new vision of the cities. So because we have not the crystal ball in our hands, we need to do something practical to go with solutions in the market. So clearly, we are in a business company. We're selling every day, and my team is. I'm asking to my team to sell and sell and sell, but without losing the focus on the long-term vision that we need to keep in our minds. So clearly, the vision is because there are so many changes so far in the market for the customer. The customer is a bit under storm because customers are receiving different concerns, messages, rules, policies, product, technologies. So it's a period of time where there are too many news that is confusing even the market and the customer. So at the focus of a company like us that is providing solution for the new vector of mobilities, in this case, electrical vector of mobility, not only cars, is clearly to simplify the life of this customer, avoiding to have to face with so huge fragmentation that currently is already in the market in terms of product offers, cars, two-wheelers, public transport, everything that is creating even issue on selecting the right vector, the right product or solution. But this is not the scope of my quick discussion of this evening. I want to focus from touching two important topics in my point of view. So one of the important aspects is that as free-to-move solution, we have a target. We want to connect two industries, the automotive industry and the energy industries. So we are acting exactly in this space in between the two industries to interconnect these two industries to get benefits, big benefits that we are already able to quantify how much it can be in the future if we are able to do what. So third-party studies, Bloomberg, IHS, firms that are forecasting the future in terms of vehicles, are saying that in Europe, in 2030, there should be 50 million of electrical vehicles on the road. No? Especially in the big cities, the large cities, and so on. Just some words about city. So according to the European Environment Agency, the cities currently are occupying 2% of the Earth's surface. That means big concentration in really small areas of the globe. So according to the United Nations, 56% of the world population are living in the cities. And there are 500 cities that are accounting for more than 1 million inhabitants. 5 of these cities are in excess of 20 million. Example, Tokyo, Delhi, Shanghai, we all know these cities. But what is important that all the cities account for 70% of the world energy use. So this is an important information that we need to take in account for my industry. So being back in Europe, so the electrical vehicles, the famous 50 million electrical vehicles in 2030, being in Europe more or less the same time fuse. It's not so different between countries, assuming that more or less will be stationary at the same time in the day, typically between 5 to 7 o'clock in the evening. This can create a huge, big, serious problem to the power grid. So I did some calculation, just making some examples. So if we are assuming 50 million vehicles in field, plugging all together at the same moment, is equivalent or comparable to 18 times the energy capacity in Italy, for example, or 70% of the installed capacity that Europe will have in 2030, not today. Clearly, this problem will be even worse if we'll take in account that the penetration of the renewable energy, we have seen how small it is today, but the plan is to increase the penetration. And we all know that the renewable, like wind and solar, are not guarantee the stability and availability, no? So we have a technology, our technology, that exploit electrical vehicle connected to the electric grid to offer regulation service to the power grid, transforming the cars, the 50 million cars, generally speaking, into a kind of huge accumulator distributed in the field. At disposal of what? Of the grid. That means when our vehicle will be parked at home overnight or in office on the premises during the day, that we all know that typically a private vehicle stay in the mobility mode 5% of the time, and the rest will be parked without doing anything. So with this technology, we have no problem to allow the grid to take this power available and to return it when it's necessary for the user of the vehicles. What I'm talking is not something that will come in years. It's already available now, today. Is already a technology available. We already built in Italy this technology. We have already a virtual power plant in Italy that is already communicating with the energy grid. Today we have 2 MW already installed that is already dealing with the Italian TSO, Terna, and we have 60 vehicles and we are scaling up, and in 8 months we'll have 700 vehicles connected bidirectionally with the grid to scale up 30 MW availability for the TSO, Terna. And from beginning of 2023, because we want to tender with them exactly for this fast reserve service, we will start operating, supporting the grid with this 30 MW. But this 30 MW is just the beginning, because it seems to be perfect, but we need, now the matter is how we can cascade really in field as much as possible to manage as much as possible vehicles and to aggregate the big fleet across Europe to offer to the grid, European grid, this kind of service to avoid what? Instability of the grid, that means breakdown of the service of energy across Europe, and to avoid even gigantic investment that the power grid needs to release in case of there will not be technology such this one, availability in field. So this is some things that give us some good returns, good benefit for both. I said already for the power grid companies, but even for the drivers, because clearly what we will start delivering to Terna from 2023 will not be for free, because clearly Terna is paying this kind of service. In Europe, there is a service, there is an analysis that is telling that in 2025, the TSOs, the several TSO who is dispatching energy across the network, will pay 8 billion euro of ancillary services to support grid, and between 2.5, 3 billion euro will come from electrical vehicles of these ancillary services. So what will get the driver back? Clearly, the driver will get back money for their service availability through the vehicles, or let's say free charge in exchange of the availability of the vehicle. That means there are mutual benefit for both sides, automotive industry and power grid industry. So this was the first topic that because it was one of the critical topic that has been listed on the critical item that has to be faced. So power availability on the network. The second one that I want to touch with you is clearly public charging infrastructure. I'm sorry. Public charging infrastructure. That is, again, you said the numbers that are really far away from the target that has been set by the European community and Commission. So just an example, 90% of the public charging network in Europe has to be released. 90%. That means if we want to run 50 million vehicles in 2030, we need to do in almost 10 years, 8 years, what has been done in 30 years, 40 years with the gasoline station in the past, and century ago almost. So that means we have no time. We recently launched a project, specific project on this specific topic. We as company, we call this project Atlante, it's just a visionary name. We want to cover a geographical area that is Southern Europe, that is Portugal, Spain, France, and Italy, where comparing with other areas of Europe, there are even less density of opportunity of recharging. We will build fast charging facilities for the fleet, for the famous 50 million cars. Let's say, why fast charge? Because clearly speaking, there are mainly couple of modality of recharging electrical vehicles. Clearly, when you are at home, if you are able to have the parking electrify, and this is another type of discussion that we need to face with the local authority, public authority rules, European rules, because there is no standard really, and this is creating additional issue. But let's say on the public, if you stay home, clearly you charge home because it's costing even less. But if you need to make a journey, a long travel, you need to have opportunity to recharge fast. So in less than half an hour, you need to recharge and to restart your journey without staying stuck on the charging point for 4 hours, 5 hours. So this is perfectly fit with the Fit for 55 direction that the European Commission gave us to have every 60 kilometer in the main highways or in the main road of the European countries, opportunity of fast recharging of the vehicle. But it's not only that. It's not only that, because our Atlante project, because we know it's public, it's not a secret, that the power grid cannot support all these fast charging needs that we have. All our stations, that will be 1,500 stations with an average of 3 chargers by 2025, and scaling up to 15,000 stations by 2030 in these 4 countries, again with an average of 3 chargers per each. All these stations will be integrated with stationary storage, that means electricity storage, to do what? First, to offer stability of the recharging process to the customer, because so far is another issue. If you are going to a 350 kilowatt hyper fast charger, you will never get 350 kilowatt, because the power is not able to support 350 kilowatt in continuity. So you will have a spike, and after you will slow down your recharging process. With our buffer of storage, we can stabilize the delivery of power to the user of electrical vehicle. In the opposite, when the station will not be used for recharging, the station will serve the net, the power net, with auxiliary service to stabilize the grid. This will imply what? Less investment for infrastructure investment for the power grid across Europe, at least for us on these three countries. Clearly, our station will be integrated with canopy, with solar panels that will generate additional energy, green energy. Clearly, it's not enough to recharge the vehicle, but it will be good to stabilize even the microgrid that we create in each station. What else? Let's say, I guess on top of products and services that we can offer to the drivers, user, and clearly we haven't any solution so far to. I like a lot the vision of the cities without cars, without parking, without anything in between. But the matter is how we can, and I do not think that all the movement of people and goods can be done without vehicles, because there is the issue of the goods too, no? That has to come in the cities. We need to provide clearly 2 solutions, minimum. This is our target for now. 2 solutions: availability of opportunity of recharging for private and for public. That is the issue that currently we are living in Europe. We are far, far away with China, comparing Europe for China. And second, we need to provide solutions that can stabilize the power grid that currently is one of the major risks that we are feeling can happen in Europe. You will not define at the European level a decision that has to be made. So far, it's so fragmented, the regulation, that it will not converge immediately in a solution. This is an issue that we need to face with. And we clearly cannot be that we meet 50 million vehicles in 10 years without this kind of solution. So I'm positive, because I guess we have a good things, technology is there. It just matter, and the investments are there because there are a lot of potential investors that want to invest in this field, both for public charging and stability of the grid. We need to have policies that will support let's say, the execution of these technologies in field. This is the most urgent things that we need to decide in Europe as soon as possible. This was my part for today. I don't know if I was in time.
Perfectly fine. So, thank you for the talks. The floor is now open for questions. First burning question.
Thank you first, and to all of you for your presentation. What strikes me is the common thread to all your presentation, because all of you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you assume that we are going to have batteries plus electric engines. And this is a bit of a surprise because, I mean, you do not talk about the hydrogen. I'm just wondering what's your view about this. Is this possible that we rely on the hydrogen engine matched with an electric motor? And what's your view about this? I mean, the question for all of you, because most of you,
I can start.
You put a strong emphasis on battery plus electric engine.
I can start. Of course, it's a technology that everyone is working on. Everyone is working on. There are already products not in the market, but in field that are running. What I'm personally thinking that this technology will be really good for vectors like commercial vehicle or light duty vehicles to transport goods. It will be even good for really long travel. But I guess that the maturity of that technology in terms of reliability, cost, and even quality will come clearly after, in my point of view, in a good execution, let's say, not before, after 2035, 2040.
Because my problem is that if we equip all the city, all the country, Italy, France, Switzerland, with charger, and if we don't need those chargers when if the hydrogen engine is going to replace, okay, the batteries, so we don't need any more charger. We need charger of hydrogen, which is another issue. So I'm just wondering, and I saw the example of China. I mean, they are investing a lot in putting charger everywhere, okay? And I'm just wondering, I mean, what are they going to do with this if we switch to something else in the near future? I mean.
Yeah. And maybe the solution is also that, I mean, hydrogen is basically a way to create electricity somehow, to store electricity temporarily. So I've got the feeling that the motor is not that different, and you could have a multi-technology, multi-energies systems, like we have plug-in hybrid vehicles today.
Right.
So that could even be a bit simpler because you have only one engine, but only two sources.
And moreover, our famous Atlanta station are already designed in the future with the possibility to host hydrogen dispenser for the vehicles that want to have. Exactly using all this capability of storing energy and so on. So clearly there will be a period of time, I'm not feeling that it will become soon, where the hybridization of the modality between pure BEV and hydrogen vehicles with a multi-energy platform architecture and so on will come. I don't think it's before the next 20 years. Personally, I'm not the most expert in the sector.
I must say that not being an expert and being often in Japan, I have noticed a few Toyotas which are hybrid vehicles and where the hybridization is a hydrogen system and the electrical system. I have no idea. I have no idea how they drive, how reliable they are, how much they are subsidized by the government. I have no idea, but I saw those kind of cars.
Yeah. We are carefully monitoring, but not only the Japanese. We have even example in Europe that are already running, more like commercial vehicle than vehicles, passenger cars. But the matter is the distribution of hydrogen and the storage of hydrogen so far. That clearly is, in terms of infrastructure, is again a gigantic investment that has to be done.
Yeah, it's a serious hazard.
Yes, but also, excuse me, to continue with the storage, not only the cities, but on the vehicles.
Yeah.
Storage of hydrogen on the vehicle is extremely dangerous and so far technically very immature. There are sort of, sorry, I have the word in French, éponge, sort of sponge, sorry, metallic sponge, absorbing it. And but you have to keep pressure, which are really critical in case of accident.
No, it's
Yeah,
more.
far more.
much more.
I mean,
much
for
more.
hydrogen to fit in a car, you need something like 300 bars of pressure.
Yes.
So to fit in the car,
And,
otherwise it's huge. I mean, it's
this
to
could
the extent
be
very.
indeed really dangerous. There has been already more than 20 years ago in Munich, I remember BMW ran
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
pilot project with hydrogen in two directions. One was hydrogen, combustion of hydrogen, like in a combustion engine, but you would put hydrogen in. They had, I remember that 20 years ago, at the airport, a column to recharge some vehicles, and they made some trials. And also they made some trials with prototype fuel cells running only on hydrogen. Probably the vehicles seen in
fuel
Japan
cell,
are
fuel
fuel
cell.
cells.
It's a hybrid fuel cell.
Yeah.
And
But the
batteries.
technology, again, is very immature and very, very costly, even more than common batteries. You think that the catalyst of the regular, let's say, or usable fuel cells is platinum.
Mm.
So it's very expensive.
Yeah, and we have less reserve of platinum on Earth than gas. So gas will be exhausted after platinum. So
Can I mention the villain of this play? The villain is nuclear power. It's an embarrassing political topic because now it's coming back. They're talking of fourth or fifth generation nuclear power plants that supposedly they are safer than the previous ones. But what about instead of thinking of the alternative renewable resources like solar power or electric power, wind power, what about going back to nuclear, but on a safer level? I know that politically speaking, it's a tough topic in Switzerland, in Germany, not to mention in Japan. But if I'm not wrong, Emilio, you can correct me. What happened in Fukushima and Chernobyl, these two big watersheds in our contemporary life, were because of human error, if I'm not wrong. So,
It depends on what you define human error. I mean, you have the human error in manipulating and dealing with the power plant. You may have a human error in the sense that you did not foresee in the design everything needed to protect the power plant.
Yeah.
Okay. Still, in both cases, you can identify mistakes. So the problem there is always that on paper, out of the drawing of an engineer, a power plant might be absolutely perfect. Then when you go to the actual realization, then we are humans and mistakes may happen. And the cost of the mistake, the probability is very low, but the cost is very high. So you always have to multiply the risk by the cost. And there you have to make a choice. So, because there are many risks. You have risks strictly related to the kind of power plant you are building, thermal, nuclear, whatever. You have a different cost, which is the cost in terms of environment, of society, and that also somewhere has to be taken into account. It is pretty clear that in the last 20 or 30 years, the societal cost, which is perceived on nuclear power plants, is very high. This is,
yes, but how we can procure the amount of electric power we need? You know, the discussion of the well to wheel instead of the will to wheel, you know. I know from Mercedes-Benz sources, the one they tested all the EQ vehicles of the Mercedes fleet, they have to choose a specific city, Dresden, because they have that amount of power requested to have, I don't know how many hundreds of vehicles tested. So this gives us an indication that we do not have enough power to afford, I don't know, half of the cars in circulation equipped with electric motors. So why don't we use nuclear power plants and we have
in this moment, it is, as you say, it is politically very sensitive. not only that, I mean, if you observe experimentally what is happening in the construction of the nuclear power plant in Flamanville, I mean, that has been under construction since 10 years. So if you have to double the number of nuclear power plants in 10 years, I mean, how do you do it?
Flamanville is probably 30 years of construction, I think, at least.
Anyway, that's a bit ago.
Yeah, but there's been many contractual problems with.
I mean, these are the kind of, I mean, unforeseen mishaps, which are not in the original drawings, but then which do happen.
I mean, even with classical design, even if it's not new technology, with the reactor that we know, there are ways to build the new ones in a safer way. When you can, you know that you have the combustion reaction, and when it starts, somebody, you know, when it's all the problems that have been in Kiev, for example, in Chernobyl or in Geneva, that the coolant didn't manage to stop the reaction. And I've seen new designs where they put a tank of coolant basically on the top of the reaction. So this way, when something breaks, it naturally breaks the pool of coolant and it stops the reaction. So it could be possible, but the political cost is too high. I mean, we try to look at the benefit and costs, but the costs in terms of human lives, even of the mining the coal and the gas and everything, is huge compared to the cost of nuclear accidents. So,
but I would to add something. Clear, nuclear is a discussion, but the numbers of vehicles that has been stated, the famous 50 million that everyone now is predicting in Europe, I'm saying in Europe, only Europe, accounts for 900 terawatt hours of capacity of storage. And there is enough potential in solar and wind to produce energy. If we store, clear, if we will not store, we need to be smart, and we have to have a regulation that will allow to use these vehicles that are storing energy to support the power grid again. And technologically speaking, is much, much easier and safe than to build a new power plant with nuclear. And technology again is there. Eh?
What's the regulation problem? Because at home I have
there is no regulation so far. But there is no regulation at all.
At home I have a charging station which can feed back my house.
Yeah.
And then they have got an intelligent counter, so in theory they could be connected together, I guess.
The matter is that the policy is not allowing you to offer this service today because of law. But it's not a matter of home, because you need to support the power grid. Because in your home is feasible, vehicle to home is feasible, always feasible. But if you need to sell this ancillary service, getting back money, today you can't.
Well, I think that in France, at least, you have this the obligation for the operator to buy back the energy generated by small
solar. I'm talking using vehicles.
Yeah, but vehicles could also be in the same.
But today is not, and there is a lot of discussion at European level that is not ending up.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And shall we condemn definitely the diesel engine, or because I used to be a big supporter of the Euro 6+ diesel engine until 2 years ago, but after the shift of the French government, now we see the damnation of the diesel engine. So are we sure we can perfection the engine, or it's only a question of reducing fossil fuel? That's it.
It depends on the kind of pollution you're talking about.
The famous choice you mentioned to me once.
I mean, it depends what the accent you want.
But there's no clarity, you told me.
I mean, if you want to reduce pollution which is harmful to us, then yes, the diesel engine is less easy to manage than a petrol engine. If you want to reduce CO2 emission, then diesel engine will always be more efficient than a petrol engine. So there, someone should tell us what's the priority. And the regulator should tell us what is the priority.
And recently, the priority has been zero emission, which means
okay, fine. That's I mean,
CO2 which means complete ban. And of course,
Okay, fine.
if we take the industry views, the industry think why to ban a technology, which is already quite mature, but could be even improved. Let's keep the door open to any possible technology. And so this is a big question which has been raised, at least in the European arena.
I'm still electrifying all cars. I mean, I was surprised by what you said. I mean, or the consequence of what you said. I mean, fine, we electrify all the cars, but this does not mean demotorization. I mean, the 80,000 cars entering Geneva every day will always be 80,000 cars queuing for entering Geneva with people sitting there and basically losing time and losing energy. So that's, I mean, I see on one side the regulator with the stick obliging me, the customer, and the industry move to zero emission, and fine. On the other hand, the same regulator should, at a certain point, also help in demotorizing. And I don't see that very much. It very much depends on where you are looking at, but
Yes. The electrification is obviously important, but I invite you to imagine a new model of mobility. First, pedestrian, second, cycling, third, public transport, fourth, by car. Congestion in the streets in all our cities is not resolved by the electric motor, which is important because zero emission is very, very important. But we can't resolve the problem of congestion of cars in the cities.
It's true. And that's because the human factor, the assumption also, we're mentioning the assumptions of the group, the assumption is also that we're going to continue to move around more. And maybe working home 2 days a week is already reducing mobility. Maybe there's other ways to reduce, as we said, within the urban centers. So maybe there's other possibilities.
Yeah, but there has to be someone that will take care to have the concept that cannot be just by chance because of local authority. It has to be a project that has been cross Europe, cross nations, and so on. It cannot be that we have these small cities that he told us that are so good, and the biggest cities that are not doing anything. Okay, electrical vehicles will not resolve the traffic jam that we are living, but it could be that if we create move from one city to the other, you can use electrical vehicle, creating the hub on the border of the city, and from this hub of recharging that are interconnecting with the grid again, after you can take local transport, public transportation, biking, everything, it would be a solution. I don't know, but it has to be designed. It cannot be just by chance because someone is waking up and doing something.
Indeed, we need a holistic approach, looking at the whole picture and not just targeting one specific, let me say, technology or sector. But for example, the points mentioned are very well working. For example, in urban area, there could be a modality shift from personal mobility to shared mobility using public transport and so on, and even more going on foot. I mean, the first one were like moving around my bicycle on foot, but I can see in Italy there are many elderly persons. They would have problem using bicycle or
for sure.
Now,
well, not only elderly. I mean, the bicycle is a funny, dynamically funny object.
So we really need to take into account many parts of these puzzles, and indeed electricity is one of them, and conceiving cities also done in certain ways, but not only, also access to the cities has to be enabled. And for that, probably personal mobility still played a leading role.
We need a mobility policy, almost at the European level.
Yeah.
Almost at the European level.
Yeah, so maybe we also need to rethink a little bit about the city, because right now the city is the companies are at the center and
Yes.
foreign people who buy the rich, nice houses, and then all the workers are outside. So they all come to the city in the morning, they all go home. Maybe if people live closer to their job, or if the job moved closer to where people live, it could solve some of the problems, distribute more the traffic, less distance. But this is, I haven't seen that in any case. So we're going to regulate mobility, and then in 30 years, when we see that it doesn't work.
Well, there were theories of what you are saying, but
Yeah, no, I know.
even in Torino, we heard of that in the 70s, but it never took off.
No, because it's, I mean, there's too much money. If you think of the price of the real estate inside the cities, outside of the cities, new constructions. But I mean, after a while, regulation must happen somewhere.
And regulation should be implemented with patience during 20 years, if I got correctly the example of the Spanish city.
Yes. Which is
a very long time from the point of view of public administration.
yes. The mayor is always in charge after 20 years, because people is happy of this new project of the city before the pedestrians.
Okay, so he had the courage to propose something which was not giving him bonuses within 2 years. I mean, he had the courage to look.
20 years, it was a political project of the left 20 years ago. But it's the only example at this moment.
Okay, it doesn't happen at the European level. I don't see big cities moving in that direction.
Okay, other questions from the audience? No? Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.